Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the CSE's podcast. This one is a bit different. This is an episode where we're going to be focusing on the role of investor relations. This is a common topic in the world of public companies. And today, myself, James Black from the CSE, joined by Julie Durant from Market Motion Media to talk about the basics. So if you're a listed company or you're thinking about going public, or just maybe you're an experienced issuer and you want to refresh yourself with the latest thought leadership on investor relations, no better person to join us today than Julie Durant. Thanks for being on the program today.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me. Exciting.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. We've done a lot of work together over the years and just recently reconnected over this. And maybe just for those listening or watching, maybe just share some of your experience and your background in IR and elsewhere.
Yeah, so I have about 20 plus years in the capital markets, mostly serving junior and small cap companies and meeting the needs of listed issuers and CEOs when it comes to organizing their marketing strategies and just relaying their story in a unique way to institutional and retail investors. So I've had the pleasure of doing that for over 2 decades, and then a lot of kind of innovative work around accredited education for the buy and sell side. So
Yeah, no, that's great and obviously highly relevant to our discussion today. With respect to IR, obviously, we'll start with the basic definition, and obviously the importance of IR is that you could be the greatest public company in the world, you could be doing the best work, and if you don't share that, obviously you have material obligations to share news, but if you're not constantly communicating with the market, you will be left behind. There's so many public companies and so many investment options out there that a good IR program, a well thought out IR program, is absolutely necessary from my experience. But in your own words, and from the lens of a, let's say, a junior public company, who's the likely audience for this discussion today, what is the role of IR? What's the importance of this function in the organization?
I think to me, really, it's we all understand investor relations or hear that term all the time, but really it's a communications role to me. So timely, consistent, accurate communication, obviously. But I think there's another layer, especially when it comes to juniors, about building credibility with an investment audience. So, realizing that it's a long game and trying to stand out a little bit from the crowd. So, it really is about building trust, though, in my opinion. And I think it's a really important role, obviously, for a publicly traded company.
Right. And programs can take all shapes and sizes. Obviously, we've seen people spend a lot of money on this. Some people just do it themselves. But just from your estimation, what is the one baseline expectation that any organization should have by employing a well thought out IR strategy? What won't they have before they start it, and what should they have after it? What is at least one baseline expectation?
To me, I always encourage CEOs to make sure they have that foundation laid even pre-public. So I call it the bedrock. We run a bedrock program at Market Motion Media, and you'd be amazed how many leaders will go into becoming public without not really having a plan of how our press release is going to roll out, who's going to be approving those, what's the standard procedure for when that news goes out in terms of social media, PR, or what's the plan. So basically having all of that, I think, and having that foundation laid is really key. And getting that messaging really clear even before you go public, to be honest. So that you can pitch that, you can tell your story and be really concise right away at the drop of a hat. Yeah.
Right. And the ability to, you know, cater your news in a fashion depending on what's happening in the greater world. Economic trends are constantly shifting. The market is obviously from not just day to day, but sometimes hour to hour, minute to minute, changing. And then the way you have to obviously change your messaging or at least adapt it to what is happening in the world is critical. And having that IR professional on your team that can help you sort of translate what's happening at the company level to what the market should be responsive to is critical, in my opinion. Think about anyone who's been an IR professional this year in the gold industry and trying to relate, what's happening with gold prices and what's happening in junior explorers and the disconnect. I think that's probably been one of those challenges, which leads me next to my next question, which is really, you talk about internal IR function, external. When deciding to build out that function, that bedrock, should entrepreneurs be looking internally or really just be exclusively looking externally? What's your thought on that?
I think that, well, I'm a little bit old school in the sense I do think it's good to have an IR professional in house for sure. However, I think there's vast benefits to be had about having a hybrid kind of solution. So, an in house person will definitely have the ear of the CEO, be on track, have a deep understanding of the business, and be able to relay that to an external party if one chooses to use it. And the benefits of having both is that the external party may bring in some fresh ideas. They bring in their network. If hopefully you're getting someone that's experienced and has a network of investors that they can draw from. So I really think a hybrid would be beneficial in terms of being able to have that flexibility, but then also not having the overhead costs of hiring a big IR company that can be quite pricey for a junior startup or
Yeah.
entrepreneur, yeah, effort, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, you got to keep things efficient, but also, like we said, you got to serve the function and serve the market. Again, so we're looking at, you've established the bedrock, you've got the team, whether it's internal or external. With respect to measuring success, so I mentioned market dynamics. You could have the best IR in the world, bad market, stock not going in the direction you'd hope, or you could have a not necessarily well-run company operating in an industry that's taken on a trend and doing wildly out of expectation, and obviously having some form of IR behind that. In your mind, those two are extreme examples, but how do you, through all the noise, measure a successful IR program, both the inputs and the outputs? In your opinion, how do you look at a program and go, despite market conditions, I know that we're having some form of success?
I think that's a really good question. And I think that, like you said, there's a lot of external weather that a junior company will have to endure. And I think really what it goes back to is how often are you communicating with your shareholder base? What's the quality of your shareholder base? So, are you keeping tabs on that? Is there some form of a Q&A, or are you running some polls? Is there some regular communication with that shareholder base? I think the theory of that you have to, I mean, obviously to have thousands and thousands of shareholders is ideal for any CEO. But I think if you have if your goal could be to start out and have 500 to 1,000 really loyal shareholders that you are consistently communicating with, you're set for success.
Right.
Yeah,
And you mentioned numbers, but that number could be a mix of different types of investors. So forget geography for a second, because
yeah.
you're listed on a market like the CSE, you have access to a global market of investors. But you're talking about primarily retail and institutional, right? So retail, the individual, the person possibly putting an order through their brokerage account, whether it's online or full service, and then the institutional accounts, which are buying in larger volume. They're supporting some fund or some sort of portfolio management strategy. Usually, they're longer term, whereas the retail investor might be trading on a day-to-day basis. But maybe just tell me the material differences between these two audiences, and in your own experience, how you manage the IR program for those two groups. And again, from the lens of a junior company, we typically see more retail involvement, and it transitions into institutional as there's growth. But we do see some institutional investors dip their oar into the water of small caps. So they should be no stranger to trying to meet the demands of both these audiences. So again, in your words, how do you distinguish them? But then how do you manage the relationship between those two groups?
Yeah, I think that to distinguish them is to understand that the retail investor or the self directed investor is really interested in really palatable, easily palatable, easy to understand, consistent information, meeting them where they're at, making sure the message fits the median. So they are on, I mean, over 89% of self-directed investors I know in North America are on some using some form of social media or some form of financial website or portal to gain access to research and information like never before. So I think as a micro cap, small cap company, we've got to be there, right? We want to make sure that our news is accessible. So whereas on the institutional side, they want to dig a little bit deeper, so they're interested in the fundamentals, right? And making sure that kind of data is accessible to them, making sure they're very aware of your strategy, and again, on both sides, building up trust and building relationships, which is really what it's all about. So, to measure the success of both of those would be okay, are we a company that eventually would like to have analyst coverage? Are we talking to the analysts that would eventually cover us now? And how often are we talking to them? And are we, and also I think too, a good effective marketing program with both of these groups can really be success isn't just measured by, oh, they bought into the market, but are they helping us inform our marketing decisions moving forward? Can we use some of the data that we're getting from the retail and institutional investors to better create things like our FAQ, our investor presentations, how we approach both groups? So really using it as educational tool too, to inform how we move forward. I've seen that be very effective.
Yeah, no, and again, there's again, as you mentioned, at the institutional level, there's formal analysts, and back at the retail level, everyone's self-directed and they're using their probably Google or ChatGPT or something like that to do the research, or it's hearsay. They've had a conversation, but at the end of the day, I think what you're trying to create on the retail side is some form of fan, right, about your stock, and the personality of the CEO plays a large part in that. And then the institutions, as you say, it's more black and white. They need to take that investment prerogative or that decision to their PM or to their boss or to their funder and justify the holding. And I think that there's just two completely different muscles you got to work as a group. So that's a good distinction, and I like how you've posited that. Okay, so I mentioned ChatGPT. Obviously, AI is becoming more prevalent in our daily life, and the capital markets and investment is certainly no stranger to that. So, just from again, I'd still say we're early days in this, but from an IR perspective, how are you seeing AI being utilized? And do you have any tips for clients wanting to employ AI in their IR workflow, or just anything they should be aware of from the IR and AI world?
Yeah. Say that 10 times fast now. So
Yeah, I know. A lot of acronyms.
I think it's important to remember that it's a tool and not a person. So let's always have a person in there to fact check and kind of be a human filter, so to speak. But I think that it can be and it will be very useful and helpful for CEOs in terms of research, in terms of finding new investors. I think Chat GPT-5 was just launched recently, and that has a whole new set of abilities. So I think responsible use of it, I think it can be used to automate routines. It can set standard procedures for a publicly traded company, provided that you're trained and you know how to input the right protocols. But I think it's very promising, used in responsibly.
Yeah, no, I agree. We use it for our own some of our workflows here at the CSE, and it's made my life easier in some respects. But yeah, that human element is so critical, and having a critical eye on the quality of information that gets produced through the AI and through the chat prompts. And so I'm as excited as anyone, but don't want there to be a prevalence of misinformation, because ChatGPT is pulling data from incorrect web information or incorrect historical information. So the web isn't perfect, as we all know, right?
Yeah,
Um,
AR is not your IR person, that's for sure. But I do think it's going to, especially as junior companies realize the importance of meeting self directed investors on places like social media, AI will be able to assist companies in just analyzing investor sentiment. And just, you know, I mentioned earlier things like FAQs and being able to really have that powerful tool a little more customized for the audience that they're interacting with. So I think it's good things to come for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
investors are going to use AI as well. They'll use it for screening. They'll use it for deeper
absolutely.
analysis. They'll use it for,
And on our point earlier about the difference between retail and institutional, let's not forget that the self-directed and the retail investor has a lot of tools. We used to sell financial tools back in the day at a place called Stockhouse and Stock Group that many of you have heard of and know well. And those tools were primarily sold to banks and brokerage institutions. And now many of the tools that we set out back then to sell to the banks are available to the retail investor now. So we're looking at a much more educated, shrewd, very well informed. So I think that's important to mention. It kind of makes me think a little bit, though, just to kind of go against myself and what I'm saying. We know that a lot of junior companies in Canada are in the resource sector. And I think the thing to understand when we are communicating between institutions and retails is to speak in plain language to the self-directed and retail investor, because they're not geologists or they may not be AI experts or technology. So I just want to make sure that we kind of cover that off, that it's really important to kind of, we don't need to dumb things down, but don't have a beginner's mindset in terms of not taking for granted they know the difference between a resource and a reserve, or what a qualified person means, when it comes to a 43-101 or any of these things. So
yeah.
yeah, I want to make sure we kind of cover that, because although there's tons of tools, they're doing lots of research, they may not be as familiar with the resource sector as we are, right?
No, exactly. And there's so much, again, competition in the mineral exploration space. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of work to do just to find the interested investor, but then distinguish your narrative
itself
amongst those.
apart. Yeah.
Because I mean, sometimes you could have a property you're looking for something very similar to someone with a property right next to you, and like, what's different, right? Which leads me to sort of my last point, which is the human element, which I think, again, the thing that really helps a lot of companies connect with investors and create that trust protocol is personality, and not just being flamboyant, loud, boisterous, or it's not really what it's about. You can have very quiet personality, but be authentic and be trustworthy and be an expert in what you do, but be a good communicator. And it's something I encourage all of our entrepreneurs, if they're not super friendly with a camera. Um, my hope, and maybe this is misguided, is that don't just implant yourself into an AI agent and become one of these robot talking heads. I think about like Max Headroom, which is a dated reference, but
Yeah.
um, I still think going out, and we apply this in our own business practices, which is still connecting with people on a one-to-one level. And I think, as you can allude to, road shows and doing video interviews and being visible is a key aspect of creating that trust and cutting through some of the noise. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. And at Mark Motion Media, we run something called the C-Suite Concierge. And I just saw such a gap. I see CEOs of junior publicly traded companies that are really having two roles. They have a operational business, whether that is a mining, a tech business in the health sector, that they are, busy day to day running. They're doing M&A, they're overseeing staff, or they're looking for a new property, or they're out at the property themselves, but then they also have the public side of things, and really what they end up doing is parallel tracking two companies, and that can get very overwhelming, and there can be a lot to do. And I've seen it in the past where a CEO has a presentation, and he's so head down and working so hard and diligently to create shareholder value that he doesn't even have time to review his presentation or be ready to speak, in a relaxed fashion. So that's where we come in, and we kind of encourage them and coach them and just take a little bit of that pressure off. And the thing I always say is, even as a CEO, not everybody's a public speaker, not everybody's comfortable getting in front of a camera or on social media, and I get that. But if you can have a monthly CEO newsletter, or get in front of your shareholders once a month, and then have a trusted person like either ourselves, or maybe you have internal market, VP of marketing or IR person that can be out there on a regular basis speaking, preaching the good, story of your company, then that's effective too, and that's good. But again, it comes back to all about building relationships and building trust.
Yeah,
And I like
absolutely.
authenticity, like not trying to be something we're not. Just yeah,
Yeah, be you.
yeah,
Exactly. Well, that's a good note to end on. I think we'll park it there for this one. But what I want to let viewers know is that we're going to do a part two, and we're actually going to dig a bit deeper into social media. We get a lot of questions about what's permissible on social media, what works, what doesn't, and some of the best practices. So, Julie, we're going to be joined by another guest as well for our next
yeah.
recording. We'll do that very shortly. But for those watching, this was Julie Durant from Market Motion Media, and also working now with the CEO Concierge. For more information, where should people connect with you guys?
Julie at marketmotionmedia.com.
Okay.
That's spelled Gule. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, direct to the source. This is James Black for the Canadian Securities Exchange. Thanks again for watching, and we'll be back soon with much more content. Follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, anywhere else you get your social content. Thanks again for watching.
Thanks.